Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to today's CMS-Wire webinar. My name is Alec. I'm the media and events producer here, and I'm here today to help answer any of your general or technical questions that may pop up. But I'm also here to introduce today's webinar, so let's get started with that. Today's webinar is titled Marketers' Roadmap to Success in the Cookieless Future. So welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining us. Here's a really rough overview of the presentation breakdown today. We have about 5 minutes for introductions. It'll really only be a couple minutes. For 35 to 40 minutes of presentation, leaving 10 to 15 for Q&A. Obviously, these times vary, so don't hold us to these too strictly. Stick with us till the end, because if you do, you will be entered to win one of two $50 Amazon gift cards or a donation to a nonprofit of your choice of equal value. So again, stick with us to the end, and you will be entered into win one of those two prizes. A little bit about CMS-Wire. If you're here, you probably know about us, but if you're not familiar, we were founded in 2003, and we cover the three primary topic areas that you can see on our screen here: the digital customer experience, the digital workplace, and information management. So you can find out more about CMS-Wire at cmswire.com. Today's sponsor, I want to give a big shout out to them at Acquia. We do quite a bit of work on webinar side of things with Acquia, and it's always a pleasure to work with the team there. So I really appreciate their support on another webinar with us. So you can find out more about Acquia at www.acquia.com. Here's our three guests that you're going to see here shortly and hear from shortly. You can see their photos here, but you will see them on camera shortly. We got Kevin Cochran, the Senior Vice President of Product Marketing at Acquia, Julian Archer, the VP and Principal Analyst at Forrester, and then we also have Beth Adams, the Managing Director of Marketing Technology at VMLY&R. So it's my pleasure to be joined by all three of these great guests. So we're going to get things started first with Beth. So Beth, I'm going to pass things over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Alex. So hi, everybody. My name is Beth Adams. And as Alex said, I am Managing Director of Marketing Technology at VMLY&R. If you're not familiar with VMLY&R, we are part of the WPP Global Network of Agencies. We are a global brand and customer experience agency, and we really focus on harnessing creativity, technology, and culture to help brands, better connect with their consumers in more meaningful ways. But I specifically help lead our marketing technology practice. And so what I'm going to kind of kick us off with here is a little bit of information on, how did we get here? Why are we talking about this cookieless future? How do we get here, and what does it mean? How is it impacting the work that we do today? And then, we'll move ahead, and Julian will provide us some great information around building data strategy, and Kevin will close us off with more detail around first-party data and CDPs. So I'm going to actually, before I dive in, I'm going to pass it back to Kevin to do a quick intro of himself and a little bit more detail on his background.
Thank you so much, and everyone, very pleased to have you all here on today's CMS webinar. I'm Kevin Cochran. I'm the Senior Vice President of Product Marketing here at Acquia, and thrilled to be discussing with Beth and Julian here the death of the third-party cookie and implications it has for brands around the globe. So Beth, thank you so much, and back over to you.
And Julian, would you like to give a quick intro of yourself as well?
I will. Thanks ever so much, Beth. This is Julian speaking. I am with Sirius Decisions. I've been recently acquired by Forrester. And what we do is provide B2B marketing guidance for our clients. And my specialty is within the marketing operations function. So I provide a lot of guidance around, indeed, building a data strategy, understanding what first-party data is and how to manage it in your organization. So I'm thrilled to be able to share that with you later on today.
Perfect. Well, then I am going to go ahead and dive in with that little bit of background and context. To kind of kick us off first, though, I do want to ask a quick question of everybody. And Alec, if you wouldn't mind, I will have you launch the survey.
Yeah, thank you, Beth. So everybody, you should be seeing the poll appearing on your screen shortly. You have three options. So the question is, what do you enjoy most about Netflix? And your three options are quality, variety, and ease. And Beth, I'm going to ask you, what's your favorite thing about Netflix? I know mine.
Yeah, I mean, it's It's, there's so many things to like, really. But, if I look across these three, for me personally, I love like the really high quality content that they've come to deliver now. Just the really engaging shows that get you super hooked and you can't stop binging. That's probably my favorite thing. But what about you? What's your perspective?
Yeah, see, I'm right there with you. I love the quality with shows like, Stranger Things or all the, the true crime documentaries that they come out with. But
Yep.
as a guy with a 6-month-old baby, the ease is really nice as well. So it's easy for my wife and I at the end of the day to unwind and just pop something on, and just let it play. So I'm
that
torn between quality
can be
and ease.
dangerous.
It definitely can. Yeah, it definitely can. And it gives you that notification. Hey, are you still watching? It's like, don't judge me, Netflix. Yes, I'm still watching. Just, but in any case, we're seeing some results coming in now. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to close this poll and I'm going to share the results with the audience. So.
Perfect. So interesting. It looks like, others are kind of, seeing a little bit of what we feel in terms of quality and variety being some of the elements that they like most. I asked this question because when we look at Netflix, I think they're a great example of a company that's delivering a tremendous amount of consumer value through data. You look at that great original content that we love. Their decisions on what content to produce and create next is based off of, a lot of data, developing machine learning estimates of audience sizes and determining, is this going to be a worthwhile endeavor for us? When you look at, the variety that they offer and how they always find that next show you're going to be interested in. Again, a lot of that's based off of, profile-based recommendation algorithms. And how they really, get you into that next show that you didn't know you needed, but you can't stop binging all of a sudden. And then finally, that effortless, great experience. They've continued to optimize the user interface, again, based upon data, to make it so easy and frictionless. And they have a great tech blog that I highly recommend, but they talk a lot about how actually they base 95% of their customer-facing decisions off of the results of A/B tests. So, as consumers, and I think as marketers, we all hear this phrase often, our last best experience now sets the expectation for our next experience. So as consumers, we're looking at that seamless, great experience we're getting with Netflix, and the next company we engage with, no matter they're in the same industry or not, we're comparing back to that. Similarly, across Amazon or Delta, we had an interesting conversation the other day about, Delta and, being, a best-in-class experience. But if you look at some of the things, the innovations that Delta's brought forward in the past few years, like, a key pain point for consumers or key point of anxiety for consumers had been not knowing where their luggage was. And so if you've flown with Delta anytime in the past few years, you may have noticed if you have the app, you can now get a notification letting you know where your luggage is it on the plane, to try to ease that anxiety. Again, a great example of a data-driven experience that really solves for a consumer pain point. And so, these data-driven personalized experiences have become the expectation. But the flip side of that is consumers have also become really fearful of how businesses are using their data. And so I wanted to kind of give a little bit of background of how we got to this point and how consumers became fearful, because I think it's important to understand, as all things are with history, is where we came from and learning from past mistakes. So if we go back all the way to 1980 and really kind of the birth of database marketing, it's when it all really started. And then in the 90s, 1994, AT&T ran the first ever banner ad on hotwired.com. Netscape creates the browser cookie. And from there, it's just a rapid evolution. We see DoubleClick, just shortly thereafter, that first display ad, DoubleClick launches, specializing in ad serving. In 2000, Google launches AdWords, really revolutionizing the industry and sponsored search and the pay-per-click model. Then going later into 2000, Apple releases the iPhone. And we know that was, definitely a game changer, and has really changed the way that we connect with consumers and, create value for them. And then Google acquires DoubleClick. And then Facebook unveils Facebook ads, really touting that they can do this profile-based targeting. So, leveraging demographic and psychographic insights to target consumers with advertising. And then as we get into, this, 2015 and beyond, we start to see things unravel. In 2003, we saw the Canned Spam Act. So we'd already kind of started to see some things come into place to give consumers more protection and control. But when we, go forward into, 2015, Vizio got hit with a privacy lawsuit over connected TVs. It was discovered that they were collecting viewing data and selling it to third parties without consent. Ultimately, in 2019, they, settled with, I think it's a $17 million lawsuit for a large number of consumers. And then Verizon in 2016 gets hit with a $1.35 million fine for using what are called super cookies. They basically created a cookie that was really hard to find or delete. And so consumers had, no control over the fact that they were being tracked for advertising. And then we had the Equifax breach, and consumers really start to see the amount of data that's been collected on them and is potentially being used by, a variety of different businesses. And then I think the really big tipping point was when, we saw the New York Times and the Observer release their expose in March of 2018 on Cambridge Analytica. And so the expose was focused on the Trump campaign and how they were exploiting Facebook data for some of their ad targeting. But it also revealed a lot about Brexit as well, and how election results in Brexit might have been manipulated based on some of that deep demographic and psychographic data that was available through Facebook. And so this was, such a headline-grabbing event that it really was a catalyst for a lot of change in, consumer perception and fear. And so we start to see, just a continual ramp up in, fines and, slaps on the wrist or more to some of the big companies. Facebook had a $5 billion fine. Google received a $170 million fine for violating children's privacy on YouTube, collecting information about children without their parents' consent. And so, through this course of events, understandably, consumers are skeptical and suspicious and worried. They don't understand who's tracking them, how, where, if anything that they do private, what happens if data about them falls into the wrong hands, is there any accountability? And so now we're, in this current environment where we have these mandates for privacy and consent. It's still, I think, really widely debated around, who should be responsible. I think everyone recognizes the need for change. We've swung to this one side where there was clear misuse, and it's built distrust. But who should be responsible, and who should be creating the change and enforcing it? And so right now we're kind of seeing forces from a few different angles. We see, governments actually driving regulations and change that way. We see businesses looking at this as an opportunity too to differentiate. If they are the ones that are, more open and transparent about how they use data, will that give them a competitive advantage? We also see a huge force of change from technology, which I'll talk about more in a second. And then consumers just really demanding it and saying that, they're not going to do business with businesses that can't respect their privacy. So I want to touch for a second on the regulation-driven changes. So as I mentioned, briefly earlier, in 2003, we already had seen, Canned Spam Act. Then we saw Castle come out of Canada, focusing a lot around email. But then in 2016, we started to hear about GDPR. The European Parliament officially adopts GDPR in 2016. And it started to really kick off a lot of the conversations about privacy and consent and forcing businesses to do things a little bit differently. And then we start to see the conversation carry forward in the US with CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act. And then over the next couple of years, we see GDPR go into effect, we see CCPA go into effect. And as marketers and technologists, we start to figure out what it means, how do we navigate it. But just as soon as we kind of get our feet under us, just last year in November, California passed the CRPA, and then Virginia, earlier this year passed the CDPA, the Consumer Data Protection Act. And so I think we're going to obviously see, this continual evolution of, government and regulatory-driven changes. I think the key takeaway, if you wanted to try to summarize what these mean, it's really about, there's kind of two core themes. It's about providing consumers notice of what data you're collecting and how you intend to use it, and then giving them a choice. GDPR and CDPA have really focused on an opt-out model, an opt-in model, where consumers have to opt in to having their data collected, whereas CCPA was focused more on an opt-out model. Consumers had to explicitly say they did not want their data collected by opting out. But I think this is going to be a continual force of change that we'll need to monitor, and obviously always consult with your legal counsel on the best way to navigate. But the other big source of change has really been on the technology side. In January of 2020, Google really kind of grabbed the headlines with their announcement that by 2022, they were no longer going to allow sites to store third-party cookies. If you're not familiar with third-party cookies, it's really a lot of why we're here today. And what third-party cookies do is they're a big part of how, advertising targeting is done based on broader browsing behavior across the internet. It's how we track people across multiple sites. And it's also a big part of how we understand, advertising effectiveness and measurement. So, a particular measure called view-through attribution, understanding when someone's seen an ad, but maybe not click through on it in that moment, but later come to the site and taken the desired action. How can we still give that ad some credit for driving a conversion? That's something that's enabled by third-party cookies. And so when Google made this announcement in January of last year, with Chrome, Google Chrome making up 69% of desktop traffic and 40% of mobile activity, a lot of marketers went scrambling and said, what does this mean? How is it going to impact me? But in actuality, the changes had already been underway for quite some time. It wasn't just Google making this change. They were just the one that really grabbed people's attention last January. Firefox and Safari, so Apple, had already, actively been making changes. So Apple in particular, so if you're not familiar, they have something called ITP, or Intelligent Tracking Prevention. They began implementing it in 2017 in Safari. And so as early as 2017, we started seeing third-party cookies only work for a 24-hour period. And gradually since then, we've seen, Apple and through their Safari browser kind of continue to chip away at cookies. So in 2018, third-party cookies no longer worked, and they even started to put limits on how first-party cookies could be used and the length of time first-party cookies could be used. First-party cookies are cookies that you create on your site, in your domain, and can use for things like web analytics, for example. And then, as we look ahead into 2020, Apple actually instituted some changes across other browsers on their iOS devices. So now in Chrome, Edge, Firefox, and Safari, if you're on an iOS device, they are subject to ITP. So we're already seeing a lot of these changes. It was just Google that kind of caught everyone's attention because they are a big part of the ecosystem. Another big change out of Apple is the not discontinuation, but the limitations now being placed on IDFA. IDFA is a unique identifier to your device that's again used to target and track the effectiveness of advertising as it relates to the app ecosystem. And so beginning with iOS 14.5, which has now rolled out, users have to explicitly allow an app to track them, making deterministic measurement on mobile effectively impossible going forward. So I want to talk a little bit about, what does all of this mean from a consumer and a business perspective? As a consumer, we need to have transparency, consent, and control. So we need to expect from businesses that we'll have transparency as to what data they're collecting about us. We need to provide our consent for them to use that, and then be able to have control to revoke that at any point in time. But really, it's going to come back to, we need to reestablish the trust. And that's going to come through, having being shown respect. For the digital advertising ecosystem, so, more on kind of the business side of it, some things are going to change, some aren't. There's certain tactics within the advertising world that aren't going to be immediately impacted. So a lot of paid social advertising may not be impacted, paid search. We're going to see kind of a rebirth of contextual targeting. But then there's going to be other things that will go away. And so when we look forward as VMLY&R, and how are we going to help our clients more effectively connect with consumers, rebuild that trust, and also, produce business value, where we see the future going is really around first-party data and identity. So as businesses are building relationships with their consumers, building that, that holistic profile, but again, transparently and with consent, and in exchange, providing better experiences for consumers. I think that's really the key point. It's not about just collecting data to improve your business. It's about collecting data to improve experiences for your consumers, which will in turn deliver business value. And so as VMLY&R and as part of WPP, we are actively working to figure out what are going to be the innovative and appropriate ways to use first-party data going forward. So we're actively collaborating with other partners in the ecosystem, including my esteemed co-presenters with me here today, to figure out what are the, how do we navigate this new future and really deliver value. And so I think with that, it's actually a perfect opportunity to turn it over to Julian to talk a little bit about how to actually build a first-party data strategy.
Thank you very much, Beth. And thanks, Andy, for that introduction and deep understanding of where we are today. What I want to do in my section is really talk about three distinct things. Firstly, understanding at a 50,000-foot view, what is a data strategy? What are the components, the segments of a data strategy? I want to talk about then some nitty-gritty. How do we transform that strategy into implementation of a solid, compliant data process? And as I mentioned, not only must we have data, we must also understand and ensure that the data that we're using is compliant throughout the organization. So let me start off by looking at the data strategy itself. I'm going to break this bit also down into three particular areas. Too often I have inquiries with my clients at Forrester and say, okay, yeah, we need more data. Well, do you? What data do you have? What data do you need? What processes are you trying to understand and drive? What data do you need at each stage of those processes? Have you documented those? Do you understand the context of what you're trying to collect the data for? Is it performance data for measurement? Or is it operational data? Do I have the right phone number? Do I have the right phone number in the right format? So fundamentally, when we come to data management or data strategy, we need to make sure that we have documented and clearly understood and defined what insights we're actually trying to gather and use. The second part, of course, is indeed the all-important data management. How do we define quality of data? What is a quality contact or an account record? How do we unify data from different various sources, for example? How do we distribute the data to the right person at the right time? So data management, all those good routines, they're really, really important. The third part we mustn't forget, although many people do, is to ensure that the teams who are using the data, who are responsible for the data, but also using it to drive their businesses forward, are enabled correctly. Do they have the competence? Do they have the competence understanding what data is, the governance policies, the privacy policies? Do they understand the technical implications of what they're doing? Do they understand the systems they're using? Are you adopting inside your organization a culture of being data-driven, where first-party data and the management of that data is really important? Is privacy really important to you as an organization, as an example? So this model helps us define what the components are of a data strategy. And sadly, the thing with data is it always changes. So as soon as you get one thing organized, something else changes. So it's a continuous process to ensure that you're continually updating what insights you need, ensuring routines are keeping the data at top quality, and ensuring your teams are continually enabled. So that's the data strategy itself, the 50,000-foot view. What does it mean in reality? How do we drive that understanding of an implementation process to drive the data strategy? So look, you'll see there at the top segment, dark green and light blue. I'm going to carry those colors forward into the next part to understand the various steps that people need to do. Now, if you're in marketing and sales and you're looking at your own data, obviously all the data strategy for marketing sales has to align fully with your company data strategy, your IT department, for example. That goes without saying. But now if I look at that bit of insight requirements, how do we translate that into practical reality? The first thing is we need to establish governance. Whether you're in marketing or sales or customer success, customer experience, there has to be a governance policy, a governance charter to define what is required and what's allowed and what's not allowed. You have to bring discipline to your process. Yes, I know it sounds a bit boring, but discipline and governance are really important when it comes to data. So think about the charter, think about a data governance council, think about what you're responsible for and what you're not responsible for. Who's responsible? Who is not responsible? So establish that governance. That's the first stage of any implementation process. Then, as I mentioned before, identifying the processes. Is it your campaign process? Is it the lead to revenue process? Is it the personalization process? All these processes are clearly recognized and understood. But are they documented well? Is it clear across board? Is it clear what data you need at each stage? And then finally, capturing the voice of the internal customer. I don't mean the external customer. I mean the people who need the data that you're providing to drive their business forward, to drive their processes forward. Do you know what they want? You can't assume that. So you need to make sure you've captured their needs and understood what is critical to quality for them. So that is, if you like, that first green segment, really putting it into practical reality. The next bit, of course, is around sheer data management. I can't tell you how many times I'm flabbergasted when our clients say, well, we want more data. I say, great. Do you know what data you have now? No. Do you know the current state of that data? Do you know how data gets into your systems through all various ports of entry? Do you have a recognized way of defining what quality looks like? Of course, we all want quality data. But can you tell me in a scientific way how you define what quality looks like? Do you understand if the record, whether it's contact or account completeness, what is important, what's not important? So this auditing the current state is really important. Finally, I think it's also important to how you acquire data, not only in a compliant way, but how you acquire data through your various tactics, etc. And then, of course, it's important to understand how you unify data from different sources. Of course, you have your own marketing and sales systems, but what about your own customer systems, your company systems? How you bring all that data together, how you go to third-party vendors, for example, how you bring it all together into a golden record. And as I mentioned before, data sadly changes. How do you curate it? What's your retention and deletion policies? Make sure that they're clear and understood. And finally, of course, you have to be measuring your results, measuring success, and understanding the nuance between a readiness metric, my database is X thousand, X million, X 100 million contacts, or an activity, I've sent out this many emails, I've sent out this many messages, or to help you with the output. The output of this activity has been X or Y. And overall, our function is having this impact. So we need to be differential and understand the different types of metrics, readiness, activity, or output metrics. So that is a way, a process of getting your shirt sleeves rolled up and bringing out a first-party data strategy that will drive quality. And the important word that Beth used there was trust. that your buyers, your consumers, your clients will understand that they can trust you with their data. But everything that lies underneath is also important, because everything we do has to ensure that we have compliant data as we move forward. So how do we do that? So now I'm going to introduce you to the third part of my presentation, which is around introducing the Forrester Data Privacy Compliance Model. Now, you're looking at quite a few boxes here. These boxes are really important. At the top, you've got that corporate data privacy compliance strategy. So what are your legal counsel saying? Are they risk averse? Are they saying it doesn't matter? Or hey, it's really important? What are the investment levels they're prepared to do in terms of training and technology? So you have to be guided by your C-suite and your lawyers of what is the policy for that company, because all laws, sadly, are open to interpretation. So you need to make sure what is the interpretation for yourself. We talk about consent for GDPR. Other organizations may think about different lawful bases. Is it legitimate interest? Is it contractual? All these are lawful bases of processing data inside GDPR. So what does your company say? At the bottom, we've got three boxes: people, technology, and measurement. How are you training your people? How are you educating them on the privacy policies? How are you making sure that they are adopting processes to ensure when they use data, they are using compliant data and use that data in a compliant fashion? What technology are you using to help you drive that technology, whether it be consent systems, data management systems, for example, data lineage systems, CRM systems, CDP systems? How are you helping drive or use technology to drive compliance? And finally, how are you measuring? If you don't measure your compliance, if you don't measure how many contacts you've got through a compliant, if you don't measure your breaches, then obviously nothing's going to happen. But the important point I want to bring home now are those 5 boxes in the middle. Namely, that is the data lifecycle. How is data coming into your system? Similar to the slide before, where I needed you to look at a port of entry analysis, you need to ensure that the data coming into your systems is compliant. In what volumes, in what countries is it coming in? So understand the visibility of how data is arriving, because you are responsible for your first-party data. You are the business controller or the data controller. You need to make sure the data intake is managed and understood. Now, many marketing and sales folks don't get involved with how data is stored or where it's stored, etc. But you may need to do that, especially if it's on your own personal drives and what have you. The data storage of that data is really, really important, because part of the trust we need to do is understand, yes, the transparency, yes, I have choice, but also, do I believe that you're going to treat my data with respect and in a secure way as well? So data storage is really, really important. And as we know, data transfers between countries are also very, very important and very, very, very key. The data usage, that's saying, okay, I have this data, I'm storing it compliantly. Now I must make sure that my teams are using the data in a compliant way, and they're maintaining its compliance as they use it and move forward, as they enrich that data, for example. Making sure that the activities that they're using the data for are in alignment with the purposes the data was collected in the first place. And then there's the maintenance. Not only the maintenance of the data itself, because as we all know, people change jobs, they move away, they change preferences, etc. So that's obviously ongoing maintenance, but maintenance of the compliance as well. After 12 months, after 24 months, you may not have had any contact. And so therefore, many lawyers would say, well, you no longer have a right to have that data, for example. So how are you maintaining that data? What is your deletion and retention policies? Now, the final box is here looking at the data disposal. Many marketers, they hate to delete data, but actually sometimes it's better for your conversion rates, it's better for security, it's better for compliance. And sometimes not only do you have to delete data, but it also saves you money and not storing data that's completely rubbish. So think about your data disposal policy as well. So I started talking today about the overarching 3 segments of understanding what data you need and what elements you need to drive the processes, the sheer data management, quality, etc., making sure your teams are enabled. I then went into say, okay, how do I do that in practice? What does it mean for me in terms of your first-party data strategy? Looking at that governance, understanding the processes, understanding what your internal customers want. Then there's the data management, data coming in, making sure it's clean, making sure it's well managed in terms of quality, and also the retention. And then underlying all of that is the need, the requirement to make sure the data you're using is compliant. And here we're looking at that life cycle to make sure that you are looking from beginning to end of data compliance, so you won't have any fines coming your way. So that's how to build a first-party data strategy. I'm very happy to answer questions at the end of this session. But for now, I want to hand it over to Kevin.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Julian. And very excited once again to speak with you all here today. In my section of the presentation, I'd like to go into a little bit more details on why a CDP, the benefits of the CDP, and specifically why the Acquia customer data platform. And as we heard from Beth, obviously, since the dawn of the digital age, we as marketers have been optimizing for campaigns and greater return on our ad spend tied to those campaigns. And as we have gotten more personalized in our digital efforts, particularly this past year, as we've all been interacting via Zoom, it's suddenly gotten very personal. And as people, as humans, we've started to expect a more personal relationship with our brands. And for this reason, people are now getting concerned, as we heard from Beth and Julian, about what is the information you know about them and how is it that you're using it to help them. And what we believe here very strongly at Acquia is we have this unique opportunity with the death of the third-party cookie and lots of change in the regulatory landscape. We, for the very first time, can truly transform for customer centricity. And the transformation of customer centricity means no longer optimizing our campaign and ad spend. It's about optimizing journeys. It's about optimizing our customer success. It's all about understanding how we can help our customer. How can we help them achieve a personal goal? Their personal goal is to not click an ad. Their personal goal is to not convert from an email. Their personal goal is to achieve an outcome with your help by leveraging your products and your services and understanding that journey they're on, researching how you can help them, understanding how to unlock the benefits, how to use the product or service most effectively. This is our opportunity to truly do something unique and to truly do something different and abandon the use of third-party cookies and put in place the first-party data strategy that Julian spoke about, implement a CDP, and help our customers. And this is a big difference from prior models because as we've seen in the past, with the proliferation of various marketing technology to optimize ad spend and our digital campaigns, we've taken bits of data about our customers and trained all of our teams to optimize against specific KPIs, greater click-throughs, greater conversions, all of these things, internal, inside out, things we are doing to a customer versus an outside in view of how we are enabling the customer to achieve something magnificent. With the death of the third-party cookie, our opportunity now is to abandon this activation-first approach and move to a new data-first approach, what I like to call a human-first approach, where we can empower everyone in our organization to be helpful to the customer and, once again, to help them achieve their goal. And as we learned from Julian, this means putting in place a data strategy that goes beyond simply unifying a view of the customer across your digital campaign. It means integrating holistically across your entire enterprise all data sources so that your customer understands all of the information that you're collecting about them, how you are utilizing it, and how that is benefiting them. And they have the right to be able to consent on whether or not you can maintain that data if you're not giving them the personal outcomes and benefits they seek to achieve. What a first-party data strategy does is the whole promise of customer experience, the whole promise of building lifelong brand relationships through your digital efforts for the very first time can truly be accomplished. Up until now, what's been shocking is the dependence on third-party cookie and how we knew more information about how our customer traversed various third-party websites than we knew about how our customer was actually interacting with different parts of our own company. We would know more information about what you browsed on CNN.com, what you browsed on, another website, than if you were browsing on my website and calling into my call center. So from a customer experience perspective, the ability to actually unify data sources and to actually have the customer consent, this means for the very first time, we can actually empower everyone in the organization to be able to make better decisions on how to help a customer achieve the best possible outcome that they can achieve. It's about moving away from that individual KPI-centered approach and taking, again, an entirely new approach. And the wonderful thing about this, as we heard from Beth, is that this actually winds up not only being better for the customer, but it delivers massive benefits to the business. By centralizing all of your data, not only do you reduce legal and regulatory risk, as we heard from Julian, but in addition, you wind up actually reducing wasteful ad spend. You actually wind up making your campaigns more effective and more profitable. And at the same time, because you're actually able to identify and relate to your customer as a real human being, one-to-one, in a non-creepy, consensual way, you're going to increase customer engagement and ultimately customer lifetime value. You're going to make a smarter business and you're going to make a happier customer. And ultimately, it's going to deliver outsized results, not only for your brand, but indeed, as we believe here in Acquia, society at large. Because what we have the opportunity to do is to rebuild trust in digital. We saw Beth's timeline. The erosion of trust has been a steady drip, drip, drip. As brands, as leaders, by putting in place a public strategy and making a public declaration on how you intend to unify data and use it for the consumer's good, that is going to reestablish trust. It's going to build that trust in your brand. It's going to build the trust in your campaigns. It's going to build the trust in your employees. And ultimately, that value exchange is going to lead to revenue growth over time. Because at the end of the day, as digital consumers, we've always felt empowered. We felt empowered in the early days of the web to go buy something on Amazon. We felt empowered with the dawn of the smartphone, and we got our first iPhones to be able to interact with our peers anywhere we were in the world. But now the next phase of empowerment is we're great on being empowered on our mobile devices and the desktop web. We want to be empowered in terms of our data. What do you know about me? Why do you know it? And how are you benefiting me? And brands that want to lead will take this mission to heart. It's not just the legal and regulatory requirements. It's the new brand promise. How are you empowering your customers to take control of their data, to take control of their journey, and to actually get the value that your brand is seeking to afford to them? And at the end of the day, we always have to remember, as brands, we are interacting with real people. And just like in the real world, you respect the privacy of your friends, you respect the privacy of your peers, you respect the privacy of your colleagues. Every single one of your customers has the same right to that confidentiality of privacy, just as if you were interacting with them in the real world on a one-to-one basis. It's more than just being compliant with all the different laws that are coming out and the more that will be coming out over the course of the next few years. As brands, as leaders, just take it to heart. It's very simple. You're interacting with the real person, have respect. And this is where a CD becomes so critical. Because with the CDP, for the very first time, the first-party data strategy Julian outlined, you can now integrate the data, unify and resolve to a unique, real person, understand what they have consented to, and what they're trying to achieve, and engage everyone in your organization so that they can assist them in achieving that outcome. And then, of course, learn and optimize how you can make the experience even simpler, even faster, even better the next time they come to speak with you. This is all about making your business intelligent. And it's not just intelligence from a data perspective. I like to think of this as emotional intelligence. Like, this is a real person. How do you help everyone in your organization have the emotional intelligence, whether a digital marketer, a CRM leader, an IT leader, to really think from an outside-in perspective on what's best for the customer? And with the CDP, particularly Acquia CDP, the goal is, again, to, for the very first time, democratize access to insights and information so that everyone in your organization, whether they're working as a store clerk, whether they're working in the call center, whether they're working at the reservation desk, whether the digital team that's putting up some new content on the website, that they have all of the insights that they need in order to make smart decisions. And moreover, not only democratize the insights, access to the insights, but give them an overall view of what that customer's done and what that customer is seeking to achieve, so that they can actually understand how their individual decision, their individual interaction is fueling that customer's journey and helping them get down the path. And of course, because you have so many customers, and because customers are only going to require ever greater one-to-one personalization, help scale your people through the appropriate use of machine learning, not to drive fear and anxiety so you can click an ad, but the appropriate use of machine learning so you can understand how to optimize each interaction point for the customer's benefit so that they can achieve their goal quicker. And of course, this is the power of Acquia CDP, unique in its ability to enable everyone in the organization to access and make sense of meaningful insights and data, and to actually put those in action with unified dashboards for analytics, personalization, orchestration, and engagement, and world-class, world-beating, 16-year proven machine learning framework so that you can consistently and optimize and simplify the customer engagement over time. And obviously with Acquia CDP, this is a long journey. There are many parts of the customer lifecycle that need to be optimized, from the initial point of acquisition, conversion, to overall growth and retention and reactivation. What's great about Acquia CDP is no matter where you start, we're going to have the appropriate machine learning models, the appropriate data frameworks in order to help you start achieving immediate goals on a long-term path for putting in place a robust first-party data strategy across your organization. And with Acquia CDP, having worked with brand leaders around the globe over the past 16 years, scale does matter. Being able to optimize each and every engagement for each and every customer around the globe, Acquia CDP has a scale handling over 21 billion transactions per day, making literally 1.4 billion predictions a day to optimize how customers can achieve the greatest value as quickly as possible, whether they're interacting with you online or working directly with one of your agents in the call center or the field. And our customers achieve outsized success. As Beth noted, when we make the shift to a first-party data strategy, it's good for the business and it's good for the customer. And I should actually say that the reverse way around. What's good for the customer is good for the business. And the results speak for themselves. Whether you're looking at long-cherished customers like a Godiva with a 333% increase in ad spend, or Wix, or a Moose Jaw with over 30% overall increase in their sales margin, When customers trust you, when you respect them, when you treat them like real people, and you empower everyone in your organization to think from a customer-centric mindset on how to optimize their journey, your business will skyrocket. And as we see here, these brand leaders are already achieving the benefits of a first-party data strategy. And I made the statement earlier that up until now, we've always optimized for specific KPIs for every specific channel that we were looking to activate, and that we needed to take that data first or human first approach. Well, the good news is by taking that human first approach, all of the KPIs that you formerly would have needed to optimize against, they also wind up getting better results than you would have ever imagined. And just looking here, taking an average across the entire Acquia customer base, we can actually see the incredible results that a first-party data strategy winds up happening by not optimizing against these KPIs and optimizing against customer success. You actually best optimize against KPIs. Average return on email sent, over 20%. Average return of ad spend, over 150%. Average increase in conversions in the call center, 100%. Average increase in numbers of the loyalty program, over 200%. These are true averages across the entirety of the Acquia customer base. And of course, we have many, many more that we could share with you, and we would love to have that conversation. So we're very excited to have this conversation with you about a first-party data strategy, because for the very first time, again, we can truly live up to the promise of customer experience. This is the promise of Acquia and our Open DXP and our unique marketing cloud, the first and only marketing cloud built from the ground up around a first-party data strategy centered on a customer data platform to empower everyone in your organization to do the right thing for your customers. So again, thank you all for joining here today on this webinar, and now we'll open it up to Q&A and a discussion.
All right, Kevin, Julian, and Beth, thank you all for that. We are going to get into Q&A now. We have about 8 minutes left, so I want to get into here as quickly as possible. So if you have a question, we already have some in the queue. If you have a question, click the Ask a Question tab. It should be appearing right below our webcams here. Type that question in and click Submit. But with that being said, we are going to get things started. And I'm going to start with Julian for the first question. Julian, this question comes from Jim, and Jim's question is, Julian, who do you feel owns the data strategy for a company? Is it the CMO, the CTO? And if it's both, where's the biggest disconnect between the two?
Yeah. I think the important thing is that one important person's been missed. And if you look at sales and marketing, they generally have 70% of most high-performing organizations give the responsibility for their data strategy to the operations team, whether it be marketing operations or sales operations. And inside those functions, you actually need to have what we call a data steward. And that person is responsible for the strategy around marketing or sales or revenue-focused data. And it's really important to think about, of course, the CTO, the IT director, of course, they are responsible for the overall company data. That's why it's important the data steward aligns, because very often we see that IT folks, they know that marketing or sales exists, but sometimes, especially in a B2B environment, they may get around to helping you on a Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock. What you need is to have somebody who's waking up every day looking at your data for your business. So that's why we recommend strongly a data steward reporting into the operations function of sales or marketing.
Yeah, I echo that as well, Julian. So often what I see is, marketing is saying to IT, tell me what you have. And IT is saying, tell me what you need. And that it's that middle layer that's really missing that can translate between the two groups.
I mean, we actually see within an organization, we talked about team enablement at the very, very beginning of my session. I think we see 3 distinct layers of responsibility. The data stewards and the analysts, they're the experts in the data. They breathe and sleep data. Then you've got the data consumers, who are the people using the data on a day-to-day basis, but they are relying, if you like, on middle people, the pivotal role of data enablers, people who understand the process, understand maybe the super users, maybe understand they may be management. But the thing is, those 3 distinct layers help us guide and ensure that the stewards are giving the right data that the consumers need to drive their business.
All right, great. Thank you. We're going to switch to Beth for this. And the question that I have for Beth is, I'm sorry, we're extending the time here. So the question I have for Beth is, what will the increased restrictions on data usage mean for consumer experiences?
Yeah, so it's, I think we're going to see a rise in authenticated experiences, for one. You're going to see a lot more sites requiring you to log in because it's going to be the main way by which they can, identify a consumer and use that data to provide you a more valuable experience. I think you're also going to see, I think in that vein, and brands trying to give you a value proposition to log in. I think we're seeing a lot of this kind of like ecosystem play and ecosystem development where brands are going outside their core products and trying to find value added services and kind of like increase the surround sound that they can create, and improve that value exchange again. So I think we'll also see, loyalty programs will continue to be a big part of first party data strategy and also being able to return value in exchange for consumers sharing their data.
Yeah, Beth, I just wanted to echo that. We completely concur with that conclusion here at Acquia, and we're already seeing massive increase in interest and investment in expanding loyalty rewards programs and moving to an authenticated experience even for prospects, and incentivizing prospects to authenticate by being much richer in terms of the content that they produce in order to get customers engaged. So a mutual value exchange, which is much more richer content on things that have topical interest that can help you in exchange for that authenticated experience and giving that consent to have a profile. So we're already seeing that shift, Beth. And I definitely think it's a healthy shift, to be frank.
All right, great. Thank you both. I'll go back to Julian on this, and this comes from, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name, Veronica or Veronique. The question is, won't small startup business owners drown in all of these new compliance requirements? And what are the average costs they can expect to incorporate into their financial plans? And can they do this on their own, or do they need third parties? That could either go to Julian or Beth, but we'll stick with Julian at first.
I think Veronique, I think she comes from the Netherlands, which is very important because that's where I'm from as well. So that's good. We have two Dutch people speaking now. I think it's important, though, to say absolutely not. The idea of privacy is, as Beth was saying, it improves your trustworthiness, improves the ability to manage the data that you actually need. It's really a challenge. GDPR and those privacy laws are the catalyst that drives good data management. It's saying, okay, what data do you want? And why do you have it? What do you need it for? Are you storing it well? Are you secure with the data? So actually, rather than give me all the data you have and let me spend money and time storing it and working out what it is and having poor conversion rates, this is actually challenging you to say, okay, you need to be good and consequential about your data management. So I think far from it, it's actually better. The privacy laws are driving a better data management process. Can you do it by yourself? Yeah. I think the strategy is really important because you can't outsource responsibility for strategy, but you're certainly going to need technical support if you haven't got it. You're going to have to get support for your unification processes, for things like CDPs, for bringing enriching data, because if you have the lawful basis for having the data, there's nothing to stop you enriching it. So I think there's always round, if you have to treat it as a carrot rather than a big stick when it comes to privacy.
Yeah. And when it comes to small businesses, a lot of the regulations have tried to, create exceptions so that these don't cripple small businesses in trying to comply. However, that being said, that doesn't mean small business can ignore them, because as I think we've established here, there's value to be gained, and it's part of a longer term strategy to put this first.
Yeah. And then I thought I would jump in as well, because I wanted to also add that there's the explicit cost of the compliance, but then there's a hidden cost that we're all bearing today. And that hidden cost is by having disparate silos of ill-managed customer data. We have risk. We have risk for cyber attacks, of theft. So there's a hidden cost there. There's also the hidden cost that we saw from some of the results that you get with CDP, which is if you're trying to only optimize one part of the customer journey with one slice of the customer data, actually your conversion rates, your effectiveness is less than if you actually unify the data, get a holistic view of the customer, then you can truly understand what the customer is trying to accomplish. And that's why with Acquia CDP across our customer base, we see these 100%, 200% or more increases in conversion rates or click-throughs. It's because for the very first time, you're actually working against a real unified data set. This is also the benefit of putting in place a CDP, because as all these privacy and compliance laws change, it's very important that you have that one centralized place where the data steward can work with the CISO and the security team to protect the data and to be compliant. So the CDP is a really critical element because it helps you pull together the data, get better business results, do the right thing for your customers, and lessen risk with compliance.
All right, we are at the top of the hour, but I want to get one more in for you, Kevin, before we close things down. And the question is, the examples highlighted, there are a lot of B2C examples. Do the topics discussed still apply to B2B? And are the results achieved similar in a B2B context?
Great question. And yes, they absolutely do apply in a B2B context. B2B is actually very interesting because B2B was always a relationship-driven sale where you had to understand real people, the key stakeholders involved in any sort of committee buying decision. So B2B sales was always much more personal, leveraging much more first-party data than maybe traditional B2C sales. If you look at B2C sales, what we see happening is they are approximating some of the typical behavior that would have normally seen in a B2B context. So when you look at some of the results that you get from B2C, the good news is from a B2B perspective, the results are only far greater.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all. We are at the top of the hour, a little bit over time, so I appreciate you all sticking with us. And if you did stick around, if you were one of the many who asked questions, keep an eye on your inbox. You're entered to win one of the two $50 Amazon gift cards or a donation to a nonprofit of equal value of your choice. So keep an eye on your inbox. You should be hearing from us within a couple of business days. Again, thanks to Beth, Julian, and Kevin. Thank you. There are a lot of information shared today. Today's webinar was recorded, and you will all receive the recording within a couple business days, so keep an eye on your inbox as well for that. And thanks again to Acquia for sponsoring today's event. Like I said, it's always a pleasure to work with the team over there at Acquia. So learn more about Acquia at www.acquia.com. So thanks again, everybody, and we'll see you next time.